IT infrastructure and moving away from 2003, and getting yourself up to, well, as we said, a more modern infrastructure, including Azure, the cloud, new servers, those sorts of things, and we'll cover that in just a moment. But here's a little bit of the background on IV4. Our goal is to assist our clients by basically evaluating their overall business challenges and try to better assess your needs, and then try and help you reach your goals within your business infrastructure through technology. So we're a Microsoft Gold partner, a Cisco partner, a Rochester Top 100 organization. And as you can see at the bottom here, here are some of our main partners, which are Microsoft, Cisco, VMware, HP, EMC, Barracuda, plus many, many, many more. Some of the areas where IV4 excel are basically around the infrastructure and virtualization and cloud, and this is what you'll see talked about a bit today, especially in regards to Office 365. But we can assist you basically moving you to the cloud, maximizing the benefits with virtualization technology, and just boosting the net worth of your network. Okay. Data manager is the next. Data management is the next area where we come into it. So your assets, stability with your data, data security, integrity, collaboration, and moving forward with the tools that you have. So that's Microsoft Office, the server tools, and everything else that goes with that. So typically, for under the collaboration side of things, IV4 as a group use things like Link, the Exchange server, SharePoint, OneDrive. All of these things come into a group and enable us to make your teams work much better together. The other areas that we work with is governance, security, and compliance. So if you're HIPAA or you need to, if you're FINRA or SEC regulated, we can help you make sure that you meet those goals and stay compliant within your organization, and help you with your business continuity and disaster recovery. So this basically means we'll sit with you, figure out what applications are more tolerant and less tolerant, to make sure that we can make failovers happen in the right amount of time. Critical systems first, lesser systems next, to make sure that we have the right disaster recovery for you as an organization. Network management is the other side of things. So we have managed services that we deal with here. So that's our Integrity Pro. So we do monitoring and managed services. And net health checks to make sure that all of your environment is running really, really well. And the biggest area for me is this last one, is the mobility and end user experience. And this is where I come into things a lot more within my role here at IV4. It's all about desktops, mobility of your users, and the collaboration, whether working with inside your organization or outside. I do feel that I'm waffling a lot, but I'll try and curb that a little as we move forward. This, I think, is the main thing here that differentiates us between our competitors and what we give to you, and we call it our IV Foresight methodology. You can see at the top here that it always starts with you as your organization, and then we as we move through our flow chart, this enables us to make sure that what we give to you as an organization meets what you're after. It's not about, here's some brand new technology, you should use this. Well, how are we going to use this? What are we going to do? How can we utilize this information? We're actually going to sit with you and work out what types of things you want. Okay, so we can see it starts with you at the very top. We then engage, we then assess what you've got, we then architect and build the framework around your goals to make sure that we understand fully what you're trying to achieve. We then prepare it, we draw up our milestones, we sit with you, we kick off, and we talk with you about what we're trying to go. Once that's done, we then deploy it, make sure that you're fully up and running, and then we maintain it to make sure that it's not something we just install and forget and walk away. The whole point of what we're trying to do for you guys is to make you better through technology along with your business goals. And I think that brings me up to the end of just a little bit about IV4. And now pretty much we're going to move over to Todd, and we're going to talk about what we're all here to speak about, which is the end of Windows Server 2003. Todd.
Yep, thank you very much, Ben, and welcome everybody. As Ben mentioned, my name is Todd Sweetser. I'm a partner technology strategist here at Microsoft. I work to help our SMB, small medium business focused partners, such as IV4, understand the solutions and make sure that they have the solutions required to help you as the customers accomplish what you need to accomplish within your IT infrastructures throughout the days. And today we're going to be talking about a few different subjects, but really the stem and the driver of the discussion is around the end of support for Windows Server 2003 R2. This slide kind of shows you specifically how many days are left before the actual date hits. It's July 14th of this year. And as you can see, the amount of days left is slimming down, not giving you a lot of time to really take a look at and understand your environment today if you are still running 2003 server. The optimistic estimates that are listed there talk about server migration being 200 days, application migration 300 plus days. Obviously, we're well under that, so I definitely recommend if you're still running 2003 R2 that you really start to take a serious look at what's running and what your next steps are going to be. So what does end of support mean when we say end of support with 2003 server? First and foremost, it's no updates. There are not going to be any further updates applied or made available. And if you think about that, there was actually 37 critical updates released in 2013 for Windows Server 2003. And many more for 2014. So that's going to come to basically a critical stop, which is one of the main reasons why you would definitely want to migrate and be on a newer version of the operating system. And another reason, of course, is in the area of compliance. You look at the fact right now, you're in a compliance situation, but after July 15th, those workstations, those servers, 2003 servers, will not pass compliance audits. And this slide specifically talks about PCI compliance. You know, if you're in retail and you need to have that PCI compliance, you're not going to be able to potentially do business if you were audited by MasterCard, Visa, HIPAA, many of the other compliances out there. It's as an unsupported operating system running business applications, you could be in a situation that could potentially, harm your business just due to the fact that it could cost money in fines. It could cost money to go out and implement it to fixes post haste versus doing it ahead of time. And there really is no safe haven. It's going to impact physical or virtualized. I mean, if you're virtualizing 2003 server, it's the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's small business server 2003. It's the same scenario. You're not protected there either. And there's obviously potential for increased operation costs due to the fact of running these unsupported platforms. And then, of course, not just the operating system itself, but many of the applications that you may be running on there will no longer be officially supported by the vendors, just due to the fact that it's running on an unsupported operating system. So, I mean, all these things across the board make it very, very important that now is really the time to act. If you've been waiting for one reason or another, this is really the time to move forward and take a serious look at what you're running within that platform and see what it's going to take to move along. And we'll talk more about some ways that you can do that as we go through today. So we're really, in a new era of computing. We're going to kind of take a step back here and look at where we've come since 2003 came into being. And, it's been quite a while. Obviously, 2003 has been around for what, 12, 13 years. So, back then the PC era was really starting to pop. The drive was to have a PC on every single desktop. But then the internet era really came over. As soon as the ability to connect all these servers, connect all these infrastructures, connect the PCs, making everybody interconnected, changed a lot of things. Changed the people utilize the workstations, changed the way people utilize servers. And today, it's kind of moved to the next step where it's really about the cloud, which is really an extension of the internet era, but provide a lot more flexibility and a lot more productivity options just by utilizing services associated in the cloud infrastructure, accessible over the internet or other ways over networking, but to enable customers to be a lot more flexible, to provide a lot more capabilities without necessarily having to implement large amounts of hardware on premises moving forward. So, 2003 provided IT with a pretty amazing operating system, but a lot definitely has changed since then. The industry's moving forward. The operating systems had to move forward. It's really important to understand why many people are starting to make the transformation and moving forward. When you look at these numbers, 71% of companies are seeing a lot of demand for IT projects, and this was in 2003 from Information Week. But probably the other two stats are more pertinent here. 70% of CIOs will embrace a cloud-first strategy going into 2016. And we're seeing a large number of the services being spent on cloud services. So that being the case, when you look at the operating system that you're potentially running on your server infrastructure, to be able to utilize a more modern operating system that can interact and work directly with cloud services, or potentially use cloud services exclusively, which is definitely another option, are things to be aware of as these data centers continue to be transformed. So it's really an opportunity for you to transform your data center today. Today's data center may indeed involve a lot of on-premises infrastructure, but it can also start taking advantage of other areas, such as the Microsoft Azure platform, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. Of course, Windows Server 2012 R2 is designed to work right alongside Azure in specific scenarios, and can take advantage of those capabilities. So it's really about cloud options on demand. You want to be able to extend the cloud when it makes sense to your business, according to your company's needs. The data center today may be configured to meet specific needs of the businesses, but the cloud solution should be able to meet that same standard. Have consistency across the two can be pretty important. And you also want to be able to reduce the cost and complexity involved. There's a kind of a misperception that moving to hybrid cloud can increase some complexity, but taking advantage of the powers and the scalability that is available in a cloud type of solution can actually help reduce overall cost and complexity, but at the same time being able to provide a much quicker response to needs of the business. So, what does Microsoft really offer in respect to this? When you talk about a data center without boundaries, with the cloud and virtual networking and being able to interact with other third-party SaaS applications and Microsoft Azure applications, innovation really is you're able to take advantage of innovation in a variety of resources, a variety of places, with a lot more flexibility than ever before, providing a lot of dynamic application delivery potentially. And there's a lot of benefits associated with that. Speed, you can actually implement these types of infrastructures in sometimes a much more efficient, quicker basis, a lot more resilience due to just a lot of the inherent fault tolerance and failover capabilities of a lot of the cloud infrastructure offerings that are out there, and potentially enhanced security, which we'll talk to as well. Security within our cloud infrastructures, we're talking about Azure, we're talking about Office 365, tends to be quite a bit more than many small businesses can potentially implement on their own. So cloud innovation is really happening at all aspects of the solutions. We'll talk about a few different pointed items here just to kind of get started. I mean, in the area of storage, in the area of networking, compute, and identity, those are some of the main places where we're seeing a lot of cloud innovation. And kind of focusing on identity at the beginning here. Azure Active Directory, which many folks and probably many people here on the phone here today have within their environment. Being able to utilize that and continue to utilize that in the 2012 R2 infrastructure, but being able to also integrate it with other applications by connecting into Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory itself can be an extension of your local on-premises Active Directory and a further enabler of your local Active Directory. Then thus working with your service providers, other third-party SaaS applications, providing multi-factor authentication across the board for your end users, providing a lot of detailed reporting, security type level reporting. All these are now possible using Azure Active Directory in concert with your Windows Server Active Directory. Storage is another area, virtualization of storage and enabling your users to be able to access a wide variety of storage options at lower costs, using more common storage tools, more commonplace hard drives, utilizing capabilities within Windows Server 2012 R2. There's a technology therein called storage spaces, where you can build out storage pools using JBOD, just a bunch of disks, and it could be anywhere from SATA, SAS-type disks, all the way up to SSD type of disks. And you'll see across the board here the types of options that are available. But when you get to the point where you're talking about utilizing SSDs in concert with hard drives, you can actually have tiering where the data that you're utilizing on a more common basis will automatically be stored on those SSDs. You'll get immediate access to it, and then data that's not accessed on a more repetitive basis may be stored on the hard drives, but still available, of course, to your users all over the SMB 3.0 protocol. And these can be utilized by tools such as SQL servers, such as Hyper-V infrastructures going across the board. And then in the far left, just to touch on something we don't see a lot of in the SMB space, but is an excellent tool nonetheless, is a solution called Store Simple, which is really an appliance, storage appliance that can take advantage of using Azure as its storage point in the background. It runs within your environment. It has inherent hard drives and SAN-like capabilities locally, but as data is accessed less and less, it is actually stored directly pushed up into the Azure storage environment, thus taking advantage of the inherent capabilities of the backup and geo-redundant capabilities of storage within the Azure environment. And then, of course, the idea of compute and network virtualization, things that have been enhanced in that respect with Hyper-V, has been quite a bit. If you look at Windows Server scale enhancements, if you're running 2003 or even 2008 today, there have been a lot of enhancements coming up to 2012 R2. And improvement factors we see in many different aspects, such as virtual processors per virtual machine. We've seen a 16 times increase from an improvement factor. If you're talking about even 2008 R2, we were allowed 4 virtual processors per VM. Now you can actually get up to 64. Virtual disk capacity has increased to 64 terabytes, so a 32 times improvement factor. Even the logical processors on the hardware has increased from 64 to 320. So the overall improvement has come quite a long ways in the terms of Hyper-V and compute virtualization, and the network virtualization kind of similar story there. What's inherently built into Windows Server 2012 R2, network interface card teaming, being able to use SMB version 3 for transportation of that data from one place to another, and then integrating and creating virtualized networks that can integrate within the Azure environment. All these things put together create obviously a very compelling solution for your applications and your server infrastructures as compared to obviously anything that was available with 2003. So really, what is the process when you're talking about migrating from 2003 or 2008 into a newer version of the operating system? We really break it down into 4 primary steps. And they're kind of broken out, as you can see here on this slide. The first one is about discovering the data, discovering the catalog and the workstations and the software that you're running within your workloads. And that can be done in a variety of ways. There are tools associated with it. Of course, Ben and his team at IV4 this whole process is something they can definitely assist with. Once you understand and discover what is actually running within your environment, the next step is really to assess, to figure out categorize what those applications and workloads, where they need to be. And it could be by type, meaning the server role itself, different Microsoft applications or third-party line of business applications that are running, what's available today in terms of those applications. Many of those third-party applications may no longer be supported even by the third-party vendors, so it may entail a little bit more research to see what would be a potential option to move forward and to modernize that application. How critical is it? Can the application be potentially retired? Is it important, or is it a mission-critical application? And obviously, you can set up your priorities in respect to those settings across the board. And, of course, complexity. Is it a low, medium, or high complex application? And that'll obviously help scope out how long it's going to take and the research that's going to be done and the work that's going to need to be done in order to analyze it. And then the risk, of course. Is it a high-risk application, low-risk application? All these things come into being when actually looking at and trying to understand what the current applications are, what their requirements are, how important they are to the business, and what the next steps are as far as the migration process. Once you kind of hash all that out, then you need to actually figure out where you're going to target those applications. And there are a variety of places now, and that, with the advent of the cloud era, there's some other options that could potentially be available. And that's, of course, Windows Server itself. If it's a server-based application, Server could still be a potential option there. But even if it's a server-based application, Azure might be another potential option. And we'll talk a little bit about Azure and some of the options that it can bring to the table. And then, of course, if we're talking about if it's an Exchange email workload, or if you're running a local SharePoint site, and some of the other tools that are within Office 365, many times moving to Office 365 for those workloads may make more sense. You'd be offloading the actual back-end maintenance of the infrastructures themselves and just worrying about configuring and consuming those services from Office 365. But at the end of the day, you really just want to make sure that you do actually make the move. And, of course, like I mentioned, Ben and his team at IV4 are definitely prepared and there to help with this process. So from a targeting the destination point of view, we'll talk a little bit about some of the options here. Of course, Server being one of those. Azure Cloud OS Network is really more about third-party hosting type of scenarios, and then Office 365. So Windows Server itself, 2012 R2, obviously is definitely, like I mentioned earlier, has come a long ways since 2003. There's been a plethora of enhancements and capabilities added to make it an excruciatingly powerful operating system, a very scalable operating system, and available to take care of many of the requirements and needs within your enterprise. And let's talk about some of those. I mean, from an enterprise scale and performance standpoint, if you look at 2003 R2, it had some pretty limited scaling capabilities. It can only handle about a terabyte of memory with the 64-bit versions, of course. With 2012 R2, it can actually scale quite a bit more. You can have 320 logical processors, 4 terabytes of physical memory. You can actually support up to 64 nodes and 8,000 virtual machines in a cluster. So obviously, in the SMB space, those are far and beyond any of the requirements you'll probably ever need. But knowing that you have that same type of capabilities for your requirements using Windows Server Standard for data center is pretty helpful. Some of the other items, shared nothing live migration. This is where we're talking about some capabilities within Hyper-V. And I'm not sure how many folks are using virtualization in their environment. Hyper-V has come quite a long ways, where we battle head-to-head with VMware and come out ahead many, many times now. And the fact that it's included with the operating system is a huge value add. And what shared nothing live migration references to is to be able to actually, if you're working in a multiple server environment, you can actually move a virtual machine from one server to another, memory, everything associated with it, the actual disk image, with very little to near no impact to the end users. Just using an Ethernet, standard Ethernet connection. The remote direct memory access is an aspect of working with the networking aspect, where it actually will forego the stack itself and directly transfer this data from one card to another without having to worry about all the overhead of the IP stack. We talked a little bit about the network virtualization itself. And things that it brings to the table. Highly available file storage. We talked about storage spaces, capabilities, being able to produce SAN-like capabilities using storage spaces technology within Windows Server 2012 R2. Inherent, and these are, again, things that didn't even exist with 2003 R2. Backup and recovery. We start talking about the wizards and the inherent capabilities of doing backups, the backup role within 2012 R2, being able to back up and restore individual virtual machines from a Hyper-V server, being able to manage versions and retention policies, and even be able to back up directly into Azure. Azure, one of the components in Azure is Azure Backup. And you can actually back up directly into an Azure storage blob, and thus making it an off-site backup, where many times today, many of our SMB customers may have backups just in a local environment, but be able to actually back up into an external secondary storage location outside of your own can be very, very powerful. Hybrid applications, we'll talk a little bit about that when it comes to Azure, and being able to have applications running within Azure in concert with applications running on a local on-premises. PowerShell has come a huge way since 2003. I think there was only maybe around 100 commandlets back then. Now we've got well over 3,000. So for those that are very PowerShell friendly, they can actually take advantage and do a lot of automation via PowerShell. And then the idea of remote desktop and virtual desktop infrastructure, all things that were not available within 2003, of course. Now, I mean, one thing to consider too is the hardware itself associated with it. 2012 R2 is generally going to require probably a little bit more powerful hardware than existed within 2003. So, I mean, that's where, again, it comes to making a choice. Are you going to replace the server hardware, or are you going to virtualize on another server? If you've got multiple servers, obviously you can take advantage of the virtualization technology that's inherent within Hyper-V on 2012 R2. Or are you going to potentially relocate to the cloud and moving some of those workloads up into the Azure environment? And, you really need to take a good look at the roles that are associated with these servers. When we talk about the roles themselves, what are these servers doing today? And what are they going to be doing as you evolve? File server, obviously, is a very common workload. can be maybe one of the easier workloads to migrate into a newer version of Windows Server. But of course you're getting a lot more capabilities with 2012 R2. I mentioned the performance with SMB 3.0 protocols. You get a lot more resilience to packet loss, built-in bandwidth throttling, being able to take advantage of NIC teaming. And also being able to take advantage of branch cache technology, something that doesn't get talked about a whole lot. But what is branch cache? Being if you have kind of a very distributed environment within your customers, you've got branches all over the place. You can actually have, using our branch cache capabilities, you can have local copies of the files at each branch themselves without having to circumvent the networking in order to get at that data. Web server is another common role being utilized by Windows Server. Obviously, it's continued to be enhanced quite a bit through the years. It's used to host intranet as well as intra and as internet sites used by SharePoint. Many other Microsoft solutions will take advantage of the inherent IaaS role, so that's something to be aware of. AD, Active Directory, has become a lot easier and a lot more flexible to use, but at the same time a lot more powerful, especially its integration with Azure Active Directory. Terminal services here, now known as remote desktop services. That capabilities have come in huge ways since 2003. 2003 didn't have anything like VDI associated with it. Which is definitely available now. And the clients, being able to set up shared desktops, being able to even do application sharing versus entire desktops, using remote application capabilities inherent within remote desktop services. And the client itself has become a lot more flexible. You can actually share USB devices with the local device. You can obviously set up file shares, do copy-paste between the clients and that shared environment. All things that didn't exist in the 2003, even some of the 2008 timeframe. And then the application server, understanding the role and what the applications that are running within that environment. Could be Exchange, could be SharePoint, SQL, of course. SQL, by the way, coming end of life next year. We've got a little more time, but SQL 2005 will be coming to end of service. So this is something else to be aware of. And, of course, third-party applications that are running. These are all things that the server, could be others as well, but these are a lot of the primary roles, so being aware of what's running within your environment today can be very important. So kind of moving from the server itself up into Azure and talking about Microsoft Azure. And that Microsoft Azure can cause question marks for a lot of people because there's a lot to it. The key word that you see on this slide here talks about being a flexible cloud platform. It provides a lot of different options, both in terms of infrastructure as a service, as well as platform as a service. And I'll talk and show some examples of that in the coming slides. But the nice thing about it is it allows you as a customer to grow with a lot more efficiency, be a lot more responsive to change, because it's an on-demand type of scenario. You don't have to go through the process of necessarily acquiring hardware. It's just about setting up the services required, being able to scale up and scale down without paying out capital costs, and really only paying for what you use in a more of a consumption-based basis. And this slide kind of shows a high level. It's definitely not everything, but some of the services that we see many customers utilizing within the Azure environment. Everything from web hosting and across the forward infrastructure platform, desktop as a service when we start talking about running remote desktop services within Azure, or even using a tool called Remote App. So on the lower left-hand side here, you'll see compute. That's definitely something that we see the most of within the SMB space, virtual machines. Many customers are taking advantage of creating virtual networks within Azure and running virtual machines to accomplish a lot of the tasks that they used to be able to do on-premises. Are you going to replace your on-premises infrastructure with it? Sometimes it is actually possible to do so. You could actually get rid of your on-premises environment and take advantage of capabilities within Azure and just have your virtual machines, your servers running within the Azure environment.
And that plays very well with Windows 8, 8.1, and obviously Windows 10 when that starts to come out. All these things linked together to give you that ability to run without on-premise infrastructure if you so require, because that's where obviously Office 365 comes in, AD on Azure and so forth. That gives you all the capabilities that you had.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So, I mean, and kind of going down the line here, you talk about data services, backup, recovery manager, and storage, of course, within Azure. Another thing that's taken advantage of by our SMB partners, or SMB customers, of course. Inherent backup capabilities within Azure Backup, integrating directly with the Windows Server technologies, and this could be 2008 as well as 2012 R2. You can back up directly into Azure storage. So what does that mean exactly? You can actually now have an off-site storage facility for backing up files associated on those Azure machines, as well as if you're using a Data Protection Manager, DPM, you could also back up Exchange. You can back up SharePoint platforms, SQL platforms up into the Azure environment. And you can create recovery points and make it so you can actually have data stored up there for long periods of time, because if you have compliance reasons where you need to have data backed up over a long period of time, many, many years, that can actually be done with Azure Backup. And then Recovery Manager really talks about being able to have a disaster recovery scenario. Azure Site Recovery Services allows you to actually back up, and backup actually is really the wrong term there, to actually have an implementation of your local on-premises Hyper-V infrastructure, and coming soon also even on-premises servers as well as VMware servers into the Azure environment. From an app services point of view, we talked about Azure Active Directory a little bit, multi-factor authentication, and then from a networking point of view, being able to actually set up virtual networks so you can have multiple servers running within a virtual network within Azure that then connect down into your local network, and it'll work just like it's running on your local network, and being accessible and domain joined across the board. So, I mean, really the cloud in this respect, as far as Azure, is about expanding your IT capabilities. It's ideal when you need to get those applications up and running fast, being able to take advantage of the large amounts of scale up and down as required. And I say up and down because, you go up based on the requirements, and you can scale back down, pay for only what you use. You can actually set up a server to only run certain hours of the day potentially, thus saving even more money, because when the servers are shut down and not running, you're not having to actually pay for it because you're not paying for what you use. And of course, taking advantage of enterprise level security. Nice thing about the security within Azure and of course Office 365 is that you're getting a level of security that SMBs and many even mid-sized and large companies haven't been able to put together. Our data centers are secure physically from the ground up, and then logically also, as far as people who can access your data. Nobody who is on site at those data centers can have any access to the servers themselves. That's all done remotely by technicians who only get access based on their requirements and a support scenario and things like that. Otherwise, they have zero access. And these applications that can be deployed up there could be SharePoint implementations if you need more power than what SharePoint Online provides. SQL can obviously be run within both as a service and as an infrastructure, and then of course any other variety of business applications. So the last obviously option that we're going to talk about today that you can move some of those services to is Office 365. And Office 365 sometimes can, for those that aren't familiar with it, folks on the line here may or may not be familiar with it. Office 365 is more than just Office. Of course, it is the Office applications, the desktop applications that you're familiar with, Excel, PowerPoint, Word, Outlook, Access across the board. but it's under a subscription model, and it also includes a lot of other capabilities that we'll talk through here. Business class email infrastructure, document storage, file sharing, online meetings, social network that can help your users work with each other, both internally and potentially externally with other people, but in a much more private manner, not a public-facing social network. It includes back-end support, and includes, of course, an SLA, a service level agreement. We're talking about a Net 3.9 service level agreement across the board, financially backed. So you're getting very powerful enterprise-level functionality at a cost that can actually make a lot of sense, especially in the SMB space. So, I talked a little bit about what it is. This slide talks to the fact that it is a subscription service that keeps you up to date with the most current version of Office applications and the associated cloud services that Microsoft manages within our data centers. The applications are optimized for a variety of devices. Ben talked about mobile devices and how important they are. We know how important they are in the picture today. There's a variety of devices out there that all have full support for Office 365, including Office clients, Link clients, being able to access your files, and OneDrive for Business, very flexible and provide controls in respect to that. All of your documents, your settings, your dictionaries follow along with your Office 365 account. There's also Office Online, Office web applications for Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote. So if your users are roaming around and they need to access any of this data, they can do so from if they're at a kiosk, in a library, at a cafe. They can still get access to those documents if they don't have the current version of Office on those desktops. Do some editing, do some view, do some authorization of those documents, and simplifying version management. So, why Office 365? Being able to share and own those documents with others. And this is within the SharePoint environment. We'll talk about this. There's a few slides that actually talk about it in a little bit more detail. Being able to collaboratively work with folks across your teams, both internally as well as potentially externally. And there's external sharing capabilities. Obviously, the inherent email, calendar, and contacts. Many times, many small businesses today are using email infrastructures that are POP or IMAP based. When they start using the capabilities that Exchange brings to the table in concert with Outlook, both on your desktops and on your mobile devices, enables you to actually get a lot more done on a lot more efficient basis. There's a lot of applications and add-ins that further enhance those capabilities, and be able to have interactive online meetings such as today. We're using the Link Online infrastructure to have this meeting. So you have full web conferencing meetings, and it's all included with Office 365. So, really, how can it elevate your business? Being able to work whenever, wherever, with mobile devices, as well as your desktops and your laptops. A lot of flexibility there. Being able to reach and contact customers, and being able to own your web presence, being able to use your own primary domain for your email infrastructure, being able to share information easily with external users, thus enabling that interaction with your customers and your partners in a very efficient manner. Maximizing that impact. Focusing the priorities with Office 365, knowing that you've got enterprise-grade protection and business continuity. What does that mean? There are layers of security within, for instance, in your email infrastructure within Office 365 and Exchange Online, such as data level protection, meaning being able to control if data leaves your email network, certain keywords you may not want to send out, social security numbers, or if you want to actually have encrypted email, that can be enabled within Office 365 to adhere with certain paradigms such as HIPAA and things like that. At the same time, you're always investing in what's next. Because going forward, as you're doing this, you're always going to have the most current and up-to-date releases. The server side is all managed within our server infrastructure. Updates are coming on a good pace. on a good basis. And you can actually go and monitor and see what's coming. If you do a search for your Office 365 roadmap, there's a public-facing roadmap that actually lets you know what's actually going to be rolling out in the coming months and what's still being worked on. So at that same cost, what's included with the cost of Office 365 is the updates both on the client side and on the server side. So I'm not going to go through, there's a couple slides here to talk through a lot of different objectives. I'm not going to go through these line by line, but a good resource to let you know things that you're maybe doing today that you want to actually change and how Office 365 can help. A few examples. Many people attaching files in email, and that obviously increases the size of your email infrastructure. But it can also cause a lot of confusion around versioning and things like that. But utilizing a shared workspace within SharePoint Online and having history of the files can help alleviate that, being able to just send links to the files back and forth. Run effective meetings by using, today you may be using pay-by-minute conferencing solutions, being able to use online meetings and shared workspaces using the link online infrastructure such as we're using today, workspaces within SharePoint. And then, as far as your work, limiting your network to your physical location, obviously Office 365 goes well beyond that, allowing you to share things on a much more mobile network and being able to use tools such as Yammer, which this slide talks to what you'd be able to utilize, which is another component of Office 365, is a tool for enterprise social networking, being able to share information internally with a familiar look and feel to other social networking tools that are out there, but in a much more locked down, secure environment. So Office 365, outside of the desktop component, the Office client component comprises of SharePoint, Exchange, and Link Online. SharePoint Online is that tool set where you can build sites. It's all a web-based tool set. Where you can actually have custom design, custom permissions. You can have sites associated with certain work groups or for the entire company and build out intranet sites. You can have announcements posted. You can also go a lot further because you can build workflows. Today you may have expense workflows that you're working through that are all paper-based, or time card type things. These are all things that can be automated with the SharePoint Online infrastructure quite easily, and making them an electronic and kind of more modernized. So all these SharePoint Online is definitely more than just basic document management. It's definitely one of the powerful functions, but it can go quite a bit beyond that. That's something where Ben and his team at IV4 can come in and actually see how you do your work today and maybe get some ideas and give you some suggestions on where you can move and how you can utilize SharePoint Online going forward. Exchange we've talked about quite a bit. From an email infrastructure, but it is an enterprise-level email infrastructure in concert with Outlook on the desktop. There's also Outlook web application access that allows you to access it via a browser with the same capabilities as the desktop application, and of course the variety of mobile devices. There's Outlook applications for iPhone, for Android, Windows Phone. So across the board, you get access to your contacts, you get access to your calendar. You can share calendars with other folks within your environment. And also create shared calendars and shared mailboxes, which are actually available at no charge. For instance, if you've got scenarios where you've got like sales at company.com or marketing at company.com, where multiple people access mailboxes or calendars to that point, those can all be set up in Exchange Online, and those are part included with the service. And then, of course, Link Online, which, by the way, is you may or may not have seen, is going to be going through an update shortly here within this month. And then one of the things that's going to be changing is the actual branding and name. It's going to become the Skype for Business Online. But still, you're going to be getting the same capabilities, even more so, being able to share desktops, programs, PowerPoints like we're doing today. These meetings can be recorded. You can record them and use them for internal training or share them with external folks using tools that you're comfortable with. And you have a lot of control over these meetings. It supports HD video. You can have up to 5 cameras actually showing at one time. And Just from a tool standpoint, if you're using other third-party meeting tools, being able to have this included as within Office 365 could potentially save you another chunk of change to consolidate it all into one solution set. So with that, I believe I'm handing it back over to Ben to close things out.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Todd. So just to run through that, the recommendations that we have for organizations, there's just a few slides here. If you're less than 15 users, Office 365 is a must. If you've done any sort of business with IV4 over the last 4 years, you are probably well aware of Office 365. We tout this a lot. To be honest with you, I don't think we've put an Exchange server in an organization in the last 2 years. It has all been cloud-based. Microsoft Azure is the next step for getting rid of your 2003 server, put that straight into the cloud, and then we can connect up with those VPN capabilities that Todd mentioned earlier on, that virtual networking that we can put together. Integrity Pro, which is our managed service, so we'll take care of all of your infrastructure. So we're talking desktops, cloud, and everything through from there. So we'll make sure that everything is taken care of within your organization, which basically gives you more time to run your business, which is the whole point of what we're doing here. 15 plus users, again, we can still utilize Azure, but typically we'll put in an additional server, the Windows 2012 server. We'll virtualize that with Hyper-V to get your Active Directory, your file storage and printing. Again, Office 365 for email, because it will give you the 50 gig mailboxes, it gives you all that enterprise class security, HIPAA, we can get your BAA if you're medical related, those sorts of things. Azure to back those things up and get you up into the cloud, and again, our managed services for managing all of that information. And I just realized that I didn't take over as presenter and move the slide along.
Oh yeah, I took over.
You did? Oh, thank you very much. There we go. Teamwork. And for 15 plus users again, did I go back? I did. All right. The last 3 slides, I'm not really going to cover too much on this. Why transform the data center, reduce the costs. We covered all of those stuff as we went forward, and I'm very aware that we're at 5 to the hour. We want to make sure that we don't go over. So with that, I'm just going to say, if you guys have got any questions, pipe up, ask away, type in the window, or reach out to us via email to your account manager or myself or Rebecca, and we'll answer any questions with you. It does look like we have a question coming in. We certainly can. We'll put the presentation together and we'll send that out to you guys. No problem at all. Any other questions?
I mean, quick question to everybody out there. I mean, was this information helpful? Does this give you some other insight that you weren't aware of before?
I definitely found it useful. I mean, I've read through these slides, but it really did help coming from you, Todd. I know that you live and breathe this sort of thing.
Good, yeah.
So I picked up some things that I was aware of, but didn't have too much clarity on from that point.
Good. Yeah, it looks like we're getting some positive feedback.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, then I'm going to give you back 3 minutes. I think is what they say. So feel free. Again, any questions, you can reach out to us, email us from there. We will follow up with everybody just to make sure that you don't have any additional questions. But with that, thank you very much for joining.
Yep, thanks everybody.